Hey, what's going on YouTube? Or Storm here with another deck profile today doing Star Seraph Shaddolls. Obviously the Star Seraphs came out on Friday in World Superstars. I don't usually do a ton of meta deck profiles, but I feel like among the top tier decks, this is one of my favorite of the bunch simply because unlike Burning Abyss or Necros, those decks don't really have a lot of room for like tweaking and tech choices, in my opinion. Like among the top tier decks, Shaddolls have the most versatility. So anyway, let's get to deck profile. So first we have 3 copies of Shaddoll Beast. I find that Beast is you want to dump Beast a lot to get your draws because like that's one of the biggest things. You want to get to your stuff as quickly as possible. So that's why Beast is basically like an upstart when it's dumped to graveyard. Only run 1 copy of Dragon because I feel like there's not a lot you really want to MST right now. Outside of maybe Vanity, like that 1 copy of Vanities, like you really don't need that many MSTs anymore. And I feel that even though I'm main decking a couple copies just out of habit, you can also change out those MSTs for effect veilers if you're really worried about Necros. 1 copy of Shaddoll Hound. Now a lot of people do not run Shaddoll Hound, but I actually think it's a very, very good card because one of my favorite combos to do when I was testing was, say I open up Hound and Sinister Shadow Games, but I don't have a fusion spell, which is something you really want to have when you're playing this deck. I will set a Shadow Hound and Sinister Shadow Games, then use Shadow Games to dump Shadow Fusion to my graveyard, then use Hound's effect to add it back to my hand. So, plus I like the effect that there's a lot of cards that you don't want to attack when they're in attack mode. And Shadow Hound just gets, and plus like it also can trigger your own flip effects during your turn to get over a lot of annoying effects. So I feel that Hound is, I would run Hound at least at 1 in pretty much any Shaddoll deck. I feel like it's a very underrated Shaddoll card. Next, 2 copies of Skomata. Some people run 3. I kind of like it at 2 because I don't want to really dig through my deck that much. I feel that 2 is kind of the ideal number in my opinion. 1 copy of Shaddoll Hedgehog because most of the time, like, you don't really need more than 1 isn't really necessary because you're not going to really be. Ideally, you want to open with it, but you don't want to really draw it, so that's why it's at 1. 3 copies of Shaddoll Falco. I feel that now that a lot of the older decks are hit, Shaddolls can really excel at the grind game. So that's why I feel that 3 Falcos is really good because you can revive your fusions such as Shekanaga, and there's not a lot of. It's really difficult for some decks to get over a 3K booty, so that's one of the reasons why. That's all the Shaddoll monsters. Now for some of the other cards. Obviously, I still run 3 copies of Mathematician because you can dump your Star Seraphs as well as any of your Shaddoll cards. So I feel like Mathematician is a 3 of. Like if you really feel like 3 is too much, you can probably get away with 2, but I feel that you'd want to run 3. 3 of the new guys, 3 Scepters. Basically just searches out your Sovereign. And it's basically like a search engine and when it's used as an XY, you can overlay with this with the cards with 2 materials, but as you can see from my extra deck, I don't run any. Like, I guess you could probably run Dagusto Emerald if you wanted, but with this one, I think this card is really good because it gives pops when you summon something like Deltaros. I really like it, and same thing with Chair, like Sovereignty. What I like about Sovereignty is it just gives you more draw power, and basically it's pretty crazy the stuff you can do with these 2 cards. It's one of the coolest 2-card combos I've seen in Yu-Gi-Oh in a while. So, and basically you special summon it when you control it, when you normal special summon a Star Seraph monster, you special summon it from your hand. It's a really cool card. But you can only use it for XYZs that require 3 or more level 4s. And lastly, 2 of the 1-ofs. 1 of BLS because it's a light and dark deck, and 1 copy of Exodius. This is one of my favorite tech choices. Especially because in TCG we don't have Jar of Avarice yet. So like Exodius is a great late game card. One of the things I notice a lot of times when I've been testing Shaddolls is that I run through resources like crazy. And if I'm playing against my opponent and I have an Exodius in my hand, and Exodius is basically like, my opponent's going to be very sad because Exodius is basically a reset button for my entire monster lineup. And I feel like it's a really great card late game until we get Jar of Avarice here in the TCG. Now for the spells, that's all the monsters. I think it's a total is 22. 1 copy of Soul Charge, like because the fact that you can Soul Charge back your fusions is really nice, and it can just set up some really crazy boards. That's why it's in here. 1 copy of Regeki because Regeki just clears boards and stuff. 2 copies of MST. I will say, like I said previously, like I don't really think you need MSTs in the main deck in something like Shaddolls. But if you don't, it depends on what your format is like. If your format is a little more back row heavy at your locals, you can feel free to change this to effect failures if you're more worried about Necros. So it just depends on what the very place you're going is. And now for the fusion spells, 3 copies of Shaddoll Fusion and 3 El Shaddoll. I've noticed some people are cutting Shaddoll Fusion down from 3 copies because of Necros, but Satellar Knights have really been going up in price and are getting more popular, and especially if your opponent has a Deltaros on the field, Shaddoll Fusion is just free food to make your fusion. Now, obviously, if they have Diamond on the field, you're required to use materials from hand, but if you're able to make Construct, pretty much you don't really care about Diamond. Diamond is a really bad problem card for Shaddolls, but also the other thing is Construct easily gets over Diamond. So that's one of the reasons why I feel that you can get away with running 3 copies of Shaddoll Fusion. And no matter what, you'd be running 3 copies of L, but whatever. So next for the trap cards, I run 3 copies of Sinister Shadow Games. A lot of people do not run Sinister Shadow Games, and I feel like the card is just too good not to run, at minimum 2, if not 3 copies. Especially when you can combo it with Hound, you can just, if you don't open with a fusion spell, but you open with Hound, you can just set Hound and dump it to the graveyard. I feel like it's a pretty decent card. I like it minimum at 2, if not 3. 2 copies of Shaddoll Core. I really like this card because, especially in this particular build, I run more fusions than most Shaddoll players do. Like, some Shaddoll players only run 1 copy of Shekanaga, but since I run Grista as well, you have to run Shaddoll Core, so that's one of the reasons it's in here. 2 copies of Breakthrough Skill because we don't like Trish and stuff like that, and I feel that in this deck, I don't want to have too many back row cards, especially if I was siding something like Denko Seika. I feel like Breakthrough is a bit better in this particular deck than something like Fiendish Chain. And then 3 copies of Call the Haunted. I'm going to do some testing on this. I kind of tested and felt that 2 is kind of a best ratio, but you can run anywhere from 2 to 3, but minimum you got to run 2 because you want to get the Star Seraph abuse as much as possible, or use out of them, so to speak. Now, this is for the extra deck. 2 copies of Shekanaga. Shekanaga is an incredibly powerful card because the fact that it can be revived with Falco and just it helps with the grind game, and it's Walking Divine Wrath is really, really nice. I feel like you should be running. There are times where you're gonna make that second Shekanaga. It's a really nice card. Obviously, the obligatory 3 Construct. Construct runs the show here, so for the most part, you're gonna run 3 copies. The card is pretty good, and it's pretty key against the arguably really bad Satellar Knight matchup. So like Construct helps you to get around that in that matchup. 2 copies of Window because I don't really see Window. Although Window is really, really good against a lot of decks because it prevents them from, especially rogue decks, from playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I feel that at 2 is kind of the ideal number you want to play. Like, you're not really going to make that 3rd copy very often, in my opinion. And then 1 copy of El Shaddoll Grista. I actually like, a lot of people do not play El Shaddoll Grista, but I actually like the card because there's certain matchups where this card is really good in. Like, and yes, you might, especially if you're thinking about something like Satellar Knights, where they try to go for their Trigger play. Well, Grista is really, really good in the Satellar Knight matchup. It's not so good in the Burning Abyss matchup, but Satellar Knights are your worst matchup, so why not run cards that are good in that matchup? So that's why it's there. And then only run 2 Synchros. In other builds, I was running more, but I felt that I wanted to run a few more targets for the Star Seraph. So 1 copy of Blackwing Nothung, the Starlight. I'd rather run this than something like Cowboy because I can make Nothung a lot more consistently than Cowboy. That's basically why this card is here, is to Cowboy for game. And I really love the other effect where your opponent's monster is 800 attack and defense. And the fact that that effect doesn't target means this card is an instant out to stuff like Leo. It can lower stuff like Yazi because it doesn't target. It's an incredibly powerful effect. I really like it. I feel like I'm glad to see more good generic level 6 synchros. And the fact that you can activate it when it's special summon means if it dies, you can just soul charge it back and burn your opponent for more damage. It's a really nice card. Then 1 copy of Leo because you can synchro up with it with Construct. And a lot of people don't think Leo's not as good now, but I still think Leo's a pretty decent card right now. And then for the Xyz, these are all things for Star Seraphs. The reason I don't run stuff like Dagusto Emerald and Exciton Knight because I feel that those cards they're not as consistent to make because you can't make it with Scepter and Sovereignty. So I feel that I'd rather just run targets for the Star Seraphs in it. So anyway, 1 copy of Evil Storm Ouroboros. This card has been going up on the market price, obviously, because the Star Seraphs are coming out. Basically, it's a really good, just generic 3-level 4 Exceed monster, and there's a lot of things it can deal with and get rid of. So, and in fact, it has 3 different effects. It can deal with hand, it can compel stuff, and it can banish. So all those effects are pretty nice. 1 copy of number 104 Masquerade. This card is really sort of like the same thing I said about Gristo. This card is really good in certain matchups, particularly Burning Abyss and the mirror match, Shaddoll mirror match, because the fact that, and it also can negate stuff like Valk. So considering the matchups you're going to run into, Masquerade is an incredibly powerful card in those particular. In fact, it can negate stuff like Valk and burn your opponent for more damage. It's really, really nice. And the other effect that you can send the top card of your opponent's deck to the graveyard. If you're playing the right type of deck, you're going to probably use that effect. Then 1 Vylon Disigama, I don't know how to pronounce it, so I'm going to say Vylon Dis. This card basically, it's sort of like a 101 or Fright for Bear. Once per turn, it can take an attack position monster and equip it to it. It doesn't gain any attack. When it battles opponent's monster with the same attribute, it turns into a Catastor. So basically, if your opponent is running a monster lineup that runs similar attributes, you can just make this card, take one of their monsters, and if it can be a little bit difficult for them to get rid of by battle. Obviously, they can just Dark Hole or Regeki the board or whatever, but that's with a lot of monsters. Then, obviously, if we're running the Star Seraphs, we're running 1 copy of Stellar Knight Deltaros. I feel like this card, I really like this card because the fact that it keeps your normal and special summons from being responded to when its summon actually hits the board and resolves. So I really like Deltaros in this deck, and it's just a really good generic Exceed. Then 1 copy of Stellar Knight Constellar Diamond. This card is mostly here for the mirror match. I feel you don't necessarily need this card to run this card, but if you have the option to make it, it's pretty powerful in a lot of against the Burning Abyss and Shaddoll and Mirror Shaddoll match. So I feel like why would you not run it? It's an incredibly good card in my opinion. So I really like. So anyway, guys, this comes to the end of the deck profile. I hope you enjoyed this Star Seraph Shaddol deck profile, and I'd like to thank all of you again, as usual, for watching. I really appreciate it when people watch my videos. Tune in on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays for more Yu-Gi-Oh! Content. Also, tune in to my Twitch stream at twitch.tv/aurastorm43. I will usually stream on Thursday afternoons from 2 to 5 Central Time. So that's the time that's permanently been moved to that time. So if you'd like to watch me stream on Twitch, follow me there. And again, I'd like to thank you all for watching. This is Aurastorm signing out.